I've been wanting to do a video on Drake London for a while. When I watched USC last year, he immediately stuck out because he pretty much dominated in every game he played. The main question with him at his size and speed is, how will he adjust to the NFL? He's been compared to numerous players, some of which I can see and others not so much. In this video, we're going to dive into all that. I've got a bunch of scattered thoughts that I'm attempting to organize into a somewhat coherent video. So right off the bat, if you know anything about London or have seen him play at all, then you know he has a supreme talent for pinpointing the ball in the air and coming down with it, many times over smaller defensive backs. He has the basketball background that we'll probably hear about in every NFL game he'll ever play. He can bully college DBs, he can make all kinds of tough catches, so he'd be a scary matchup for most defensive backs in man coverage, and in zone he's good at finding soft spots. Sometimes this past season it seemed like London was getting open, but the ball was so underthrown that it turned into a 50-50 ball situation. It makes you wonder what in the world he could have done with a more accurate quarterback. Now, I don't mean to say London's separation is elite. When you look at some of these other first-round receivers, they would put London in the dust in a race from the line of scrimmage downfield. But I will say that with a better quarterback situation, London's separation issues wouldn't look quite as bad. I've seen a lot of Mike Evans comparisons, and I'm not sure that's exactly what I see. I think Evans can separate better than London will ever be able to, and when you look at their average depth of target or yards per reception, then the stats would show Evans as more of an intermediate and deep threat, while London is more of a short and intermediate game changer. But when you watch Evans rise above defenders in the end zone by using his length and grip strength to come down with the ball, that's where you see the London similarities. Either way, I think there are still better comparisons to be made. He's got very similar size to Mike Williams. Still, maybe the best comparison is Brandon Marshall. If you go back and read the scouting reports on Marshall coming out of college, they were saying the same things we hear about London. A good blend of size, power, and athletic ability, but isn't fast enough to consistently beat corners over the top, and is going to have problems separating from defenders in the NFL as easily as he did at the collegiate level. Marshall was listed at 6'4.5" while coming in at 230 pounds. I've seen some people worried about London's weight, with USC having him listed at just 210 pounds while measuring 6'5". There are barely any productive receivers with those measurements in the NFL this century. Turns out he's actually a hair under 6'4", so he's not as tall as we thought, but still tall. And he did put on weight, hitting 219 pounds at the combine. It's important to note that he's still just 20 years old, so once he gets involved in an NFL weight and nutrition program, he should be able to at least maintain that weight and probably gain more muscle as well. He could definitely develop into that Brandon Marshall body and play in a similar fashion as a big play possession receiver. He's incredible at catching contested balls in the air. When you watch him play, he is that guy that you say is just never really covered. But I know some people are scared of hearing that being a prospect's greatest skill when we've seen recent guys like N'Keal Harry or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside looking great in college, but unable to replicate that success in the NFL, with every corner being stronger and faster than what they're used to facing in college. I will say that London is much better after the catch than those two, which also means he's much better in the screen game than those two. He's tough to bring down, and sometimes he can make people miss to create his own space. The Patriots really tried to get Harry involved in the screen game early in his career, but he would go down so easily. London is much better in that regard, and he's better in the slot as well. Maybe most importantly, when you put aside the injuries, he was far more productive in college than either of those guys. I mean, London was the leading Power 5 receiver in yards per game this past year. Harry and Arcega-Whiteside were very good in college, but they were never in the conversation for being the nation's best receiver. London was not only squarely in the mix for that pre-injury, but you could easily argue he was leading the charge. I can guarantee that he'll have a better pro career than Harry and Arcega-Whiteside. I know that's not saying much, but there are too many people willing to throw him in with them, and I just don't think it's fair based on what he did in college. Now, London has said after recovering from the broken ankle injury that his body feels stronger and faster, but he then had his pro day moved due to a hamstring injury, so I guess there could be some injury concerns, but he did play in every game his freshman and sophomore year. I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Draft-wise, London not running the 40-yard dash could potentially hurt his stock. He said that other players get to train for the 40 for a couple of months while he was just trying to get back to running, which kind of destroys his argument about being faster now. But he did participate in cone drills and run routes, so I think it's fair to say that if he was able to run an unexpectedly good 40 time, then he would have done it. The main reason, of course, was because the time most certainly wasn't going to be relatively good, so he made a business decision to not run it and let his film speak for itself. In fact, he even came out and told people to watch the film. He said everyone knew where the ball was going at USC and he had double, triple coverage all game, and it still didn't stop him. Some scouts seem to agree with London's assessment of himself, with one telling NFL.com that he doesn't care how fast London is because his ball skills are so special. All things considered, London could potentially be the first receiver off the board. Garrett Wilson is probably getting projected in front of him more often than not, but it's looking like London will go in the first half of the first round. Although I will say it seems GMs around the league are differing in opinions on this draft class more than any other we've had in recent times. Anyway, London was too good in college for people to just chalk it up as being a box-out college receiver destined to bust in the NFL. I think there's a much better chance he ends up being close to Brandon Marshall than a N'Keal Harry, which is kind of ironic considering how high Harry went in the draft while Marshall sat until the 4th round. I guess that just speaks to how unpredictable the draft is. But if I were to make a prediction, I like London and honestly feel like he's been getting disrespected by some NFL fans who just don't realize how incredible he looked last season. So that's all we've got for today's video. Let me know what you guys think of Drake London. Where would you rank him in this year's wide receiver class? I'll tell you, there are certainly some other good ones that make that question really tough to answer. As always, be sure to subscribe because we've got more draft videos headed your way.
Seems like the questions most often asked about you are about your speed, just in general. What would you say to people just in terms of answering those questions?
Watch film. Yeah, pretty much at the end of the day, watch film. Don't really have to blow by guys to catch a ball. I mean, I can at the end of the day, but I really don't have to.